Welcome to my channel. Today I am going to tell about At last I have married my sugar daddy happily. The roar of the party was a physical thing, a throbbing beast of bass and laughter that vibrated through the floorboards and into Tina's bones. She was at its center, a whirlwind of honey blonde hair and reckless abandon, her head thrown back in a laugh that was swallowed by the music. At 18, Tina Moreau was the undisputed queen of her high school's social scene, a title she wore like a crown of thorns. Her life was a carefully constructed performance of rebellion, a middle finger raised to the quiet, predictable sadness that had settled over her home like dust. Her father, Charles, was a historian, a man whose life was spent among the quiet echoes of the past. He loved Tina with a quiet, desperate intensity, watching her furious dance through life with a mixture of awe and profound worry. "Just come home safe, baby girl," was his nightly plea, his voice a soft murmur against the slam of the front door. Her mother, Evelyn, was a different story. A former beauty whose glory was beginning to fade, she viewed Tina's youth and vibrancy as a personal affront. Her criticisms were sharp, precise scalpels aimed at Tina's insecurities. "Must you dress like that? Is that another boy calling? Have some dignity, Tina." And their home was a silent war zone, with Charles the weary peacekeeper caught in the crossfire. Tina's rebellion was her armor. The parties, the skipped classes, the fleeting connections with boys who were as lost as she was, it was all a way to feel something, anything, other than the suffocating emptiness she felt within those four walls. She was a paradox, the life of every party, yet profoundly, achingly lonely. Chapter 2. The Silence After the Storm. The end came not with a bang, but with a terrible final silence. Charles Moreau's heart, worn down by worry and the quiet strains of an unhappy marriage, simply stopped one Tuesday afternoon. He was found at his desk, a book on Roman history open in front of him, his reading glasses askew. The world Tina had so defiantly built shattered into a million pieces. The parties ceased. The music died. The roar was replaced by a silence so complete it was deafening. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and somber faces, a parade of people offering hollow condolences. The only thing that felt real was the gaping, Charles-shaped hole in the universe. The reading of the will was the second earthquake. The life insurance was modest. The savings, meager. The house, it turned out, had a significant mortgage. The life of gentle, academic comfort Tina had always known was a facade, maintained by her father's careful diligence. It was gone. Evelyn's grief was performative, a dramatic display that lasted about as long as the casseroles kept arriving from well-meaning neighbors. 6 weeks after the funeral, her tears were replaced by a frantic, desperate energy. She dyed her hair, bought new clothes on a creaking credit card, and began to haunt places where money and loneliness intersected. Upscale wine bars and charity galas. It was at a museum fundraiser that she met Roger Thorne. He was a real estate developer, a man carved from tan leather and gold watches. His smile was wide, his laugh too loud, and his eyes held a calculating coldness that Evelyn, in her desperation, mistook for strength. He represented stability, a life raft in the churning sea of her new poverty. They were married in a quick, garish ceremony 3 months later. There was no romance, only transaction. Roger acquired a beautiful, if fading, trophy wife. Evelyn acquired his credit cards and an address in an exclusive zip code. The house Tina grew up in, filled with the ghost of her father, was sold. All his books, his quiet presence, his history, boxed up, sold off, erased. They moved into Roger's sterile, modern townhouse. It was all sharp angles, cold marble, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out on a perfectly manicured world. It felt like a museum, or a very expensive prison. Tina, lost in a maelstrom of grief, became a ghost in its halls. Her rebellion had evaporated, replaced by a numb listlessness. Evelyn, rejuvenated by her new wealth, became a stranger. She was dismissive of Roger, spending his money with a voracious appetite while offering him nothing but cold indifference in return. And towards Tina, she was utterly devastatingly detached. Tina was a reminder of a past life, of a failed marriage to a gentle man who had never provided the glamour she craved. She was an inconvenient piece of furniture, to be ignored and eventually discarded. The harbor in the storm. Arthur Pemberton was 55. He was a man who carried his age with an air of quiet authority. Silver streaked his dark hair at the temples, and lines etched the corners of his eyes, lines earned from laughter, not worry. He was an architect, a man who built things meant to last. He had been a client of Charles's, consulting him on the historical preservation of several properties. He'd admired Charles's intellect and his quiet dignity. He'd sent a condolence card after Charles's death. Unlike the others, it was handwritten, the ink a deep blue, the words thoughtful and specific, recalling a particular afternoon discussion they'd had about Gothic architecture. Tina had remembered it. A month after the move to Rogers, adrift and lonely, She found herself in a quiet coffee shop, staring into a latte she couldn't afford. The bell on the door jingled, and in he walked. He was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored navy sweater and slacks, a thick biography under his arm. He noticed her immediately. His gaze wasn't intrusive, but kind. "Tina?" he said, his voice a warm, low baritone that seemed to cut through the fog in her head. "Arthur Pemberton. I was so very sorry to hear about your father. He was a truly good man." Hearing her father described in the present tense with such genuine respect was her undoing. The carefully constructed dam broke. She put her face in her hands and wept, great heaving sobs of grief, loss, and terror. Arthur didn't flinch. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply guided her to a chair, fetched her a glass of water and a napkin, and sat in silence, a steady, calming presence until the storm passed. That was the genesis of their arrangement. It began not with transaction, but with compassion. He became her sanctuary. His texts were a lifeline. "Tough day. I'm by the Riverwalk. The swans are out. Come get some air. I've booked a table at that little French place you said your father liked. Let's go remember him well." He quietly settled an outstanding tuition bill for her community college classes she'd been forced to drop. But he didn't just give her money. He gave her his time, his attention, his vast, quiet wisdom. He talked to her about art, about history, about life. He listened. He saw the intelligent, hurting young woman beneath the rubble of rebellion and grief. He called her out on her moments of residual recklessness, not with anger, but with a gentle, firm concern. "That fire in you is a gift, Tina," he'd say over dinner, his hand covering hers. "It's your spirit. But a spirit needs direction. Don't let it burn down the things that matter, including yourself," the unfolding. The chemistry between them was a slow, inevitable burn. It was in the lingering touch as he helped her with her coat, the way his hand would rest on the small of her back to guide her through a crowd, the intensity of his gaze when she spoke, as if her every word was a precious artifact. The romance didn't crash over them. It rose like a tide, slowly and surely covering the barren shore of her life. One evening, after a play he'd taken her to see, he walked her to her door. The townhouse was dark. Evelyn and Roger were at some event. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, her voice soft. "For everything." He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers whisper-soft against her cheek. "It is my genuine pleasure, Tina." He leaned in and kissed her forehead, a paternal gesture that should have felt safe. But it didn't. It felt like a prelude. The next time, under the same porch light, his lips found hers. It was tentative, questioning, a kiss that held back an ocean of feeling. It was the most profound moment of her life. She began spending more time at his house. It was the antithesis of Roger's cold monument. Arthur's home was a warm, lived-in testament to a life well lived. Books overflowed from shelves. Art collected from his travels adorned the walls. It smelled of old paper, wood polish, and him. It felt like a home. One night, curled on his large leather sofa watching a film, a deep sense of melancholy gripped her. She spoke of her fears, of the gaping void of guidance in her life, of the twisted examples of relationships she'd witnessed. "My mother, she doesn't see Roger. She sees his bank account, and he sees a pretty thing to show off. Is that all there is?" she asked, her voice small. Arthur paused the movie, the room sinking into a thoughtful silence. "No, my dear, that is a fraction of what there can be. There is so much people fail to teach, especially about intimacy. The movies make it about passion and drama. They forget about trust, communication, patience, the profound beauty of truly knowing someone." He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking into her soul. "Will you teach me?" The question fell from her lips, a brave, terrified whisper. He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her jawline. His eyes were deadly serious, filled with a care that was almost reverent. "I would be honored to. But we set the rules together. We go only as far and only as fast as you wish. This isn't about taking, it's about learning, together." What followed was nothing like the sordid fantasy the term sugar daddy might imply. It was an education. He started with conversation. He used documentaries, historical texts about courtship, and psychological studies to explain the architecture of human connection. He taught her about consent, not as a legal concept, but as a continuous, enthusiastic dialogue between partners. He spoke of female pleasure not as a secret, but as a right and a joy to be explored. He answered every question with a clinical yet gentle honesty that stripped away all shame and replaced it with awe for the human body and spirit. The practical lessons were a natural, breathtaking progression of that deep, abiding trust. Their first time was not in a frenzy, but in his bed, with soft lamplight and slower. He worshipped her body with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, his touch a language of adoration and respect. He was patient, guiding, attuned to her every sigh, every tremor. He wasn't just teaching her about sex, he was teaching her about making love. He was showing her that her body was not an object for taking, but a sacred space to be cherished. In his arms, the last fragments of her rebellious, broken self melted away, and a new, confident woman began to emerge. She was falling utterly, completely in love with him. And he, though he was more cautious with the word, was clearly, deeply in love with her. He called her his second renaissance, his unexpected miracle. The abyss, the fragile stage of their lives shattered with the force of a bomb. Evelyn, bored with Roger's money and starved for the drama she confused with passion, had found a new distraction. A charismatic, penniless sculptor 20 years her junior. Tina came home from a day with Arthur to find a single sheet of paper on the cold granite kitchen island. She was gone. She'd drained the remains of their joint accounts and vanished without a trace. Roger's reaction was not one of heartbreak, but of pure, unadulterated narcissistic rage. He blamed Tina, his fury terrifying. "You!" he screamed, his face purples. "You and your pathetic, selfish bloodline, you're just like her. A leech. Get out of my house." He gave her 1 hour. Panic-stricken, trembling, she called Arthur. Within 20 minutes, his car screeched to a halt outside. He didn't ring the bell. He walked straight in, his usual calm replaced by a protective fury that made him seem 10 feet tall. He stared Roger down, a silent, brutal promise of retribution in his eyes if he so much as touched Tina. He loaded her bags into his car, his jaw a hard line. He didn't speak until they were safely inside his home, the door locked against the world. He took her face in his hands. "Listen to me," he said, his voice fierce with emotion. "You will never be thrown out again. You will never be homeless. You will never be unloved. This is your home. For as long as I live, this is where you belong." The cocoon. And so their true life began. It was a world away from anything she had ever known. It was a life of profound domesticity and deep, abiding passion. Mornings were shared over coffee and the newspaper, him reading aloud interesting articles, her feet tucked under his legs. He taught her to cook elaborate meals, his hands guiding hers, his laughter warm in her ear when she made a mess. She introduced him to her music, and he, in turn, opened her world to classical composers, explaining the stories behind the symphonies. Their nights were a realm of breathtaking intimacy. Their romance life, a word she coined in her private thoughts from romance, nurture, and sensual connection, was everything. He was her lover, her protector, her teacher, her best friend. He made her feel seen, valued, and profoundly safe. In the cocoon of his love, the wounded girl finally healed, and a strong, capable woman emerged. It was in this paradise that she noticed the change. A lingering fatigue she blamed on happiness, a sensitivity to smells that had his coffee suddenly seeming bitter. Then, she was late. A week passed. Then another. A cold dread seeped into her bones. They had been careful, but not perfect. What would he say? A man his age, who had lived a full life, finally free of the burdens of young adulthood, now faced with the ultimate consequence. A pregnant teenager in his beautiful, orderly home. She bought a test, her hands shaking so badly she could barely open the box. The 2 blue lines appeared instantly, a definitive, terrifying verdict. She met him at the door that evening, the plastic stick held out in her trembling hand, tears already streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Arthur," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I've ruined everything. I'm so sorry." He took the test, his face unreadable. He looked at the lines, then back at her tear-streaked face. The emotions that crossed his features were complex: surprise, concern, a flicker of sheer terror. But they all settled, finally, into a profound, awestruck tenderness. He pulled her into a crushing embrace, his own body shaking. "Sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "Tina, look at me." He pulled back, holding her shoulders, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "This is not a mistake. This is a miracle. You are my miracle. We're having a baby." His joy was instant and all-consuming. The practical, nurturing side of him kicked into overdrive. Doctor's appointments were booked. Prenatal vitamins appeared on her bedside table. He read pregnancy books aloud to her at night, his voice soft and wondrous. He painted the nursery himself, a soft, buttery yellow, humming as he worked. His love for her seemed to magnify, becoming more protective, more awestruck, more deeply committed. The judgment, but the world outside their bubble was not kind. Rumors, once whispers, now flew through the city's social circles. A pregnant young woman living with the wealthy, older Arthur Pemberton? It was a scandal too juicy to ignore. The term sugar baby was bandied about with vicious glee. The rumors reached Roger, whose bitterness had only festered. Seeing an opportunity for revenge and to perhaps claw back some of his wounded pride, he went to social services. He filed a formal report, painting Arthur as a predatory older man who had groomed a vulnerable, grieving young girl. He spoke of his own supposed attempts to provide a stable home, undermined by Arthur's manipulation. A court summons arrived. The state was petitioning to investigate the welfare of the unborn child and to potentially remove Tina from an unsafe and exploitative environment. It was their worst nightmare. Arthur hired the most formidable family lawyer in the state, his face a mask of grim determination. "I will not let them take our family from us," he vowed, his hand resting on her swelling belly. "I will burn everything I own to the ground before I let them separate us." The courtroom was cold, imposing, a temple of judgment. Roger sat on the other side, a smug, vindictive set to his jaw. The judge, a stern-faced woman with intelligent eyes, listened to the arguments. The case seemed to hinge on perception, a powerful older man and a naive, pregnant teen. Then, it was Tina's turn to speak. She stood, her hand resting on the undeniable proof of their love growing within her. Arthur stood beside her, a steadying pillar of strength. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong, belying the storm of fear inside her. "Everyone in this room sees a number, a 55-year-old man and an 18-year-old girl. They see a transaction, they see a stereotype, but I ask you to see us." She told their story. She spoke of her father's death, her mother's abandonment, Roger's cold hostility. She spoke of Arthur's kindness, his patience, his unwavering support. She presented evidence, not of money transferred, but of a life built. Texts, planning dinners, emails about her college courses, photos of them laughing at a museum, the receipt for the yellow paint for the nursery. "Arthur Pemberton didn't find me vulnerable and take advantage," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "He found me shattered and helped me put myself back together. He is the most honorable, decent man I have ever known. He is the father of my child and the love of my life. He didn't prey on my grief. He gave me the strength to move beyond it. He is my home." She turned and looked directly at Arthur, her love for him shining in her eyes for the entire court to see. "He is my destiny." The courtroom was silent. The judge's stern expression had softened. After a short recess, she delivered her ruling. "The court finds no evidence of coercion, predation, or exploitation. The relationship between Mr. Pemberton and Ms. Moreau, while unconventional, demonstrates a pattern of mutual respect, genuine emotional support, and committed partnership. The petition is dismissed in its entirety." She then looked down at them, a hint of a smile on her lips. "And it seems congratulations are in order for you both. I wish you and your child every happiness." At last. The relief was so profound it was dizzying. They stumbled out of the courthouse into the sunlight, holding on to each other as if they'd just survived a shipwreck. That evening, back in the sanctuary of their home, Arthur led her to the garden. The setting sun cast a golden glow over everything. He got down on one knee, his eyes glistening with unshed tears of joy and relief. He opened a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a large, flashy diamond, but a perfect, elegant emerald-cut stone, set simply in platinum. "Tina," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I loved you before the world thought it had any right to an opinion. I will love you long after today's victory is a memory. This child, you are my greatest creation, my second chance. My entire heart, marry me, please. Let me be your husband in the eyes of the world, as I have been in my heart for so long." Through tears of pure, unadulterated joy, she said, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The wedding was small and achingly beautiful, held in their own backyard under a canopy of twinkling lights and blooming jasmine. Tina, radiant in a flowing ivory silk gown that draped over her baby bump, held the hands of the man who was her past, her present, and her entire future. Her vows were simple. "You found me when I was lost. You loved me when I felt unlovable. You are my teacher, my protector, my best friend, and the love of my soul. I am yours forever." His voice broke as he spoke his. "I lived a full life before you, Tina, but I was only waiting. You are my renaissance. You are my home. I will spend every day of my life honoring the incredible woman you are." The officiant smiled. "You may now kiss your wife." Arthur cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek, wiping away a happy tear. "At last," he whispered, a promise and a sigh of a long journey finally ended. "At last," she echoed, before his lips met hers, sealing their happiness, their family, their hard-won, magnificent love. She was no longer a reckless girl, a sugar baby, or a victim of circumstance. She was Tina Pemberton, a woman, a wife, a mother. And she had, at last, married her sugar daddy, her Arthur, happily.